This video contains content discussing violence, death, and murder. Viewer discretion advised.
The Phantom Killer of Texarkana, also known as the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, refers to a series of unsolved violent attacks that occurred in and around Texarkana area, which straddles Texas and Arkansas border. The attacks took place in 1946, and the perpetrator unfortunately has never been apprehended. Here's a summary of the case. February 22nd, 1946, the first attack. The first known attack occurred on Friday when Jim Hollis and Mary Jean Larry were parked in a secluded area during that night. A masked assailant approached their car, ordered them out, and proceeded to attack them with a pistol. Both victims survived, but the attacker escaped. March 24th, 1946, the second attack. Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore became the second set of victims. Their bodies were found on a secluded lover's lane. Griffin died at the scene, while Moore died unfortunately in the hospital the next day. The assailant used a .32 caliber pistol. April 13th, 1946, the third attack. Betty Jo Booker, a teenager, was found unalive. She had been shot and SA'd. Her saxophone was discovered a short distance from her body. May 3rd, 1946, the fourth attack. Virgil Starks and his wife Katie were attacked in their home. Virgil was unfortunately unalived, but Katie survived with gunshot wounds. The attacker had fled the scene before he could be apprehended by the police. The attacker primarily used firearms, a .32 caliber pistol, and targeted couples parked in isolated areas. There were some instances of SA during the attacks. Witnesses described the assailant as wearing a mask made with a white cloth with holes cut out for eyes and a mouth. The crimes occurred across state lines, making it challenging for law enforcement from Texas and Arkansas to collaborate efficiently. The case garnered significant media attention, leading to widespread attack and panic in the community. Local law enforcement agents received assistance from the Texas Rangers and the FBI. Despite several false alarms and numerous suspects, including some arrests, the Phantom Killer was never definitively identified. The fear within the community prompted changes in behavior, such as curfews and increased vigilance. The identity of the Phantom Killer remains unknown to this day, and the case has never officially been solved. The Texarkana Moonlight Murder inspired the 1976 horror film The Town That Dreaded Sundown, and its 2014 remake. The forensic technology available in the 1940s was not as advanced as today, making it difficult to gather conclusive evidence. The killer's use of a mask and the small town atmosphere led to difficulties in identifying or remembering key details about the attacker. The motive behind the attack remains unclear to this day. The randomness of the victims and the nature of the crimes add to the mystery of this crime. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders remains one of the most infamous unsolved cases in American criminal history. Despite numerous investigations and public interests, the identity of the Phantom Killer has eluded law enforcement to this day. The case serves as a chilling reminder of the challenges law enforcement agents face in solving crimes, especially when dealing with a determined and elusive perpetrator. Here is just a brief description of the victims of the Phantom Killer during the Texarkana Moonlight Murders in 1946. Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jane Larry, the first attack on February 22, 1946. Jimmy Hollis was a 24-year-old veteran, while Mary Jane Larry was a 19-year-old. They were the first known victims of the Phantom Killer. The attack took place while they were parked in a secluded area. Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore were the second victims on March 24, 1946. Richard Griffin was a 29-year-old World War II veteran, while Polly Ann Moore was a 17-year-old. Their bodies were found on a lover's lane, both having been shot. Griffin died at the scene, while Moore died later in the hospital the next day. Betty Jo Booker, the victim of the third attack on April 13, 1946, was a 15-year-old high school student. She was found unalive, having been shot and sexually assaulted. She was also a talented saxophonist, and her saxophone was discovered a short distance from her body. Virgil Stark and Katie Starks were the victims of the fourth attack on May 3, 1946. Virgil Starks was a 37-year-old farmer, and his wife Katie Starks was 36 at the time. The attack took place in their home, where Virgil was killed and Katie survived with gunshot wounds. The victims were from diverse backgrounds, and their lives were tragically cut short by the actions of the Phantom Killer. The attacks had a profound, lasting impact on the Texarkana community, leading to increased fear and changes in the behavior as residents sought to protect themselves from the unidentified assailant. The unsolved nature of the case has left a haunting legacy in the true crime history. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders case had several suspects and persons of interest, but the elusive nature of the killer and lack of conclusive evidence led to the case remaining unsolved to this day. Here are just a brief summary of some of the notable suspects. The Young brothers, Henry Booker Tennyson and Jake Flegel, also known as the Young brothers, were arrested and initially considered as suspects. However, they were later released due to lack of evidence. The youth suspects. During the investigation, several young men were arrested for questions, but none were definitively linked to the crimes. There were, of course, several suspicious individuals and local ex-convicts that were considered, as numerous individuals with suspicious behaviors were investigated, but unfortunately none were conclusively connected to the murders. And of course, due to the nature of the crimes, law enforcement agents looked into several ex-convicts, but unfortunately there were no direct evidence linking them to the murders. An unknown hitchhiker. Witnesses reported seeing a suspicious hitchhiker in the area around the time of the murders, but the person was never identified or connected to the crimes. The Phantom Killer letter writer. A person claiming to be the Phantom Killer sent letters to the local newspaper and the police. However, the authenticity of these letters and whether they were genuinely from the killer remains uncertain to this day. It's important to note that the lack of advanced forensic technology and the passage of time have made it more difficult in time to definitively identify the Phantom Killer. The case remains unsolved to this day and one of the most enduring unsolved mysteries in criminal history. The Texarkana moonlight murders have been the subject of such speculation and investigation by amateur sleuths, researchers, and authors over the years, but unfortunately no breakthrough in solving the case has occurred. The true identity of the Phantom Killer remains unknown as the posting of this video. The Texarkana moonlight murders case lacked substantial forensic evidence by modern standards, and the available evidence has unfortunately not led to any identification of the Phantom Killer. However, here's a quick summary of the evidence and key aspects of the investigation. Crime scenes. Of course, the crime scenes themselves provided some evidence, such as the location of the attacks and the position of the victims' bodies. The weapon. The Phantom clearly used a .32 caliber pistol in the attacks. Bullets and casings from the crime scenes were examined, but again, due to the lack of evidence and advanced forensic technology at the time, limited the analysis. Witness statements. Eyewitnesses provide descriptions of the attacker's appearance and behavior, including the use of a white cloth mask with holes for eyes and a mouth. Survivor testimonies. The survivors of the attacks, such as Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Larry, provided statements about the events leading up and during the assaults. Letters and communications. The Phantom Killer reportedly sent taunting letters to the local newspaper and law enforcement agencies. However, the authenticity of these letters and whether they were genuinely from the killer remains unclear. Vehicular evidence. In some cases, the killer reportedly approached the victims' cars on foot, while in other incidences, a vehicle was used. Descriptions of the vehicles were provided by the witnesses. Crime scene reconstructions. Law enforcement agents attempted to reconstruct the crime scene to understand the sequence of events leading up to and following the attacks. Autopsies. Autopsies on the victims were conducted to determine the cause of death and gather any potential forensic evidence. However, the limited forensic technology of the time hindered detailed analysis. Community surveillance. The community began to become more vigilant with increased patrols and watchfulness. This, however, did not directly contribute to the identification of the killer. Reward offered. A reward was offered for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the Phantom Killer, but this does not result, unfortunately, in a breakthrough. Despite these efforts, the lack of modern forensic tools and the elusive nature of the killer, this all prevented law enforcement agents from making any definitive identification or solution in the case. The case remains unsolved, and the identity of the Phantom Killer remains one of the more enduring mysteries of criminal history.